before. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll just kind of have a bit of a yarn, really.
Yep.
All
Sounds good.
right. All right. Welcome to the Time to Grow Up Dad podcast. Today I've got a very dear friend of mine, Julianne, joining us. Hello, hello. Hope
Hi.
research isn't killing you.
Not yet.
Not yet, not yet. But well, actually, for those who don't actually know you, maybe
hmm
giving a little bit of a listener or watchers, for those who watch on YouTube, a little bit of a background of what you do.
hmm
Um, for context, I met Julianne through powerlifting, and then going through my own journey being a clinical nutritionist. Obviously, found out that she was a very, very self, very, very good clinical nutritionist, has been in the field for a long time. Um, but yeah, maybe a little bit of a background for people
hmm
who are watching and what you do.
Yep, sure. So my background is very educationally. So
Yep.
I'm a registered nurse. I'm also trained in interior furniture design and design for disability. So that's career number two, which I did for about 10 years. Wheelchair seating for people with disabilities. Then I got interested in nutrition because I changed my diet and it made quite a profound impact on my health. And I just became completely fascinated. And that was back in the mid 90s. So what does that make? 30 years ago?
Oh yeah.
20 years ago? How?
Like I said, she's been in the game for a long time.
20 years. Oh, I don't know. It's a long time. Anyway,
Hey, longer than
no,
I've close.
30 years, 30
Yeah,
years. Longer than some people have been alive. Um,
100%. Me included, actually. Yeah.
yeah, so I've been through like a lot of iterations and seen a lot in terms of diet over the years, which has been given me a much broader perspective, I guess, than maybe people entering the profession now. So that's the kind of a longitudinal view of fads and trends and fashions and food.
Mm.
Personally, I am married. I've got two kids who we adopted from Russia in 2001,
Okay,
who
2001.
are now in their 26 and 28. So
Oh, wow.
it's been a
Okay.
journey from that
Yeah.
perspective as well.
Yeah, for sure. If you don't mind me asking, um, was there a particular reason on why 2001? Like, was that time of your lifetime was like, yep, you would like to have kids, and then decided to go down the adoption process? Was that sort of
Yeah, so in 2000, so basically, um, we tried for a while to have kids and it didn't happen. And then I think I went through one lot of fertility treatment and thought this is like, you know, maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. And we had friends that had adopted from Russia.
yeah?
And we knew two or three other couples, like personally, that
Oh,
had adopted from Russia, and it worked out reasonably well. The process was pretty straightforward.
okay.
And in terms of adoption from New Zealand, there's not many babies that are available for adoption. So we thought we'd like to have a family. We're not
Yes.
going to spend gazillion dollars hoping that fertility treatment would work. There are lots of children in the world that need parents.
Yeah,
We can be
yeah,
parents. We
100%.
can afford this. It's we're willing to go down that road. So that's what we did.
Yeah. Well, this is a very I have a question because I think like this would be quite a very unique perspective, and that's also one of the main reasons why I reached out to you to have a chat, because there's actually a few friends within our circle sort of really recommended me to have a
Uh-huh.
chat with you of your
Uh-huh.
very unique position. What do you feel like would be I'm sure you would have friends who had kids of their own growing up.
Uh-huh.
Do you find that there were any very unique challenges that sort of presented itself having adopted children, particularly in like the earlier stages?
I think two main challenges. One is you don't know their sort of genetic background.
Of course, yeah.
So that's one thing, and that could affect people like physically and mentally, like mental well-being, mental illness. The other one is you don't know what the womb environment, the mother's environment was like, and whether that had an impact
Yeah.
on the child, So
Yeah.
we did quite a bit of research into fetal alcohol syndrome and the effects of drug and alcohol on development. And the third one is the effect of being in an orphanage or an institution on a child in their very early years.
What? Yeah. Hey,
um,
old school phones. They still work. Sounded like an actual phone
it
phone.
is an actual phone. We still have one actual phone, and it just gets random
Calls every
spam
so
calls
often.
most of the time, apart from my elderly dad who rings it occasionally.
Of course. Yep. Yep. Right. Okay.
So yeah, those are the three main issues that come with adoption.
Yeah. I would assume it would have been quite an interesting. So I'm just sort of doing the math in my head really quickly here. You sort of mentioned their mid to late 20s, 2001. So doing the quick math here, this sort of around 9, 10-ish when were they adopted together at the same
They were
time?
adopted together, and they were 3 and 5 at the time,
Okay.
and they're half siblings.
Half siblings, gotcha. Um,
Yeah.
from a parent's perspective, was it quite hard to foster that initial parental relationship at the start? I know you mentioned there's obviously a lot of very specific road bumps that you would have to go through, like what you mentioned, but from a
Yeah.
parental relationship standpoint, did you find it quite difficult to
Um,
get in the door, so to speak?
Not really. I mean,
Oh, that's cool.
yes, in some ways because you don't know them. So if you there's kind of that didactic relationship where you know a child and you react to them and they know you and they react to you, and that kind of that evolves over time. But we never had that initial evolution, so they were like strangers.
Yeah.
But from the start, they called us Mama and Papa, so it wasn't
Yeah,
like
yeah,
before they
yeah.
knew, hey, we've got new parents. Um,
Gotcha.
so there's that side of it. But yeah, there's just the not knowing who they are, but at the same time, the responsibility is like the same
The
as if you
same,
were
yeah,
handing
exactly the
your
same. Yeah, for
baby.
sure.
It's like, here's the child that you have chosen to look
Bring
after for
up and
their
foster
lives,
and bring
and
into
so
life, yeah.
it's just that's it. So whatever happens, you have made that commitment, and you're fully on board with that.
Yeah. The, I might be a bit of a deep question here, but did they ever um did they know their parents like prior? Did they have any sort of cognitive
No,
awareness like this
they'd
when they
been
were
in
young?
orphanage for 3 years, so
Oh
they
wow, okay.
didn't remember their biological. Like, our son was just a wee
Parents.
baby; he was only a couple of months
Yeah.
old, and our daughter was 2.5.
Seems
So
to be
no, they
pretty
don't have
pretty
they don't have a memory of their biological mother.
gotcha. If you don't mind, because I was quite intrigued, like what, and I'm sure it would be fairly different now in this day and age. And this is very, very like I'm really talking out of my depth here, but I'm
Mhm,
assuming the process would be sort of like going through the whole admin thing, and then you actually
mhm,
would have to fly to, in your case, Russia,
mhm,
meet the orphanage,
mhm.
stay there for a couple of weeks to see who might be a good match for you and your husband, and then kind of take them home? Is that sort of what the process?
A little bit different. So yeah, there's a New Zealand process that all adoptive parents go through, whether you're adopting locally or internationally. So there's that,
Right.
and they do a whole home study on you. So lots of interviews and come and
Oh,
check
of
out
course.
all your background information to decide whether they think you're going to be appropriate parents. You know, you're going to
Right.
be good parents. And then there's an extra couple of international adopting courses that you do.
Oh,
And
wow.
then once all of that has happened, it's not a long process, like a couple of months. Um, then the report and your preferences go to the Russian authorities. Now, just to put it in perspective, Russia isn't allowing adoptions and hasn't done it for some time, so that doesn't happen anymore. But back at that time,
Hmm.
25 years ago, it was. So yeah, and we decided that we'd want 2 children, and everyone we knew had adopted one child and then went back for another child a couple of
Right.
years later.
Okay.
So we knew we wanted two. So that makes it better for the Russian authorities, because then if they've got a sibling group or 2 siblings, they'll try and adopt them out together, keep them together.
Right.
Um, and we also chose to adopt kids who were a little bit like not babies, because we wanted to have some certainty about their development, like
Yeah, yeah. You don't want
fully
to. Yeah.
developed. And we just knew we weren't mentally or physically able to look after children who may have, I don't know, like developmental issues that we
Hmm.
weren't prepared to or able to deal with. So yeah,
Yeah.
if they're a little bit older, it's easier to kind of know where they're at developmentally.
Yeah. I think that sounds like it's possibly sort of just putting myself in your shoes. Not that I would have the slightest
Mm,
inclination of how that thought process would even go, but
mm,
that would probably seem like the hardest thing with that, especially if they're really, really young, like before they're one.
mm,
There's so many things happening. You
mm.
don't really know what could happen.
No,
You
you
kind
don't.
It's more of a peace of mind. Like, okay, like even if they're two, you can almost treat them like a kid. Kid, like, okay, you're
Yeah,
sick. Like Tamil will probably work. And
yeah,
probably need to drink water. Whereas if they're really, I guess, 6 months and younger, it's like, whoa, like
yeah,
it's probably a
yeah.
big headache.
Yeah, so there's that kind of certainty, but still, then
Mm,
you never know what's going to happen.
that's parenting, I guess. That's
Even
life,
so,
really, actually.
yeah, but I think it's partly because the institution and the background and maybe the genetic side of things. Yeah,
Yeah. So as they grew up, obviously they moved over here, brought them over, started
yeah,
growing up.
yeah.
It would seem like, at least from what you said, the relationship was fairly easy
Hmm.
for the most part to sort of foster that
Hmm.
parent-child relationship. Um, were they ever made aware at any point that they were adopted? Like, is that something you'd like to share, or maybe no?
No, they knew off the bat,
Oh,
and
okay.
yeah,
And were they like how when do you mind me asking like how old was that disclosed and how did they take it?
they knew from the beginning. So like they
Just I guess they
understood,
already
because they were
understood probably.
3 and 5, and they understood
Mm,
they were going from the orphanage with a new mama and papa, and they weren't their biological parents.
yeah,
And obviously these people looked different, and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
they spoke another language. I
No,
mean,
yes, of course.
we did try to
How
we
did
did
actually how did that go? It's tangent, but like how yeah, like how did the
oh,
communication go?
yeah,
'Cause
so I put quite a lot of effort into learning a lot of basic Russian before
yeah,
I went there. So we could communicate, and had the little phrase book, and
Mm.
a 5-year-old daughter would always be like trying to explain things to us. But then I don't know, they just kind of make themselves understood. There's a lot of sign language, pointing,
Yeah.
and then there's a lot of the
Yeah,
basic
I
stuff.
definitely realized that with a 1.5, everything's like
Yeah,
sign language.
yeah. So there's a lot of that, um, and with basic language, you can get so far.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's cool. That's
and
cool.
yeah.
Did they ever got curious on like their biological parents
Mm,
or?
no. Our daughter in particular did. She was really keen to find out. So, a few years later, I can't remember what date, it must have been 2010 or so, we did a birth parent search, and found, anyway, there are people who do that in Russia and who speak English, and we got in contact with that guy through an intermediate who was a Russian woman who'd also had adopted kids. And he eventually found mum and 4 other siblings.
Ooh, okay.
So in 2012, we went to Russia, took the kids back to Russia, took them to the orphanage, met their siblings, met their biological mother. And 2016, we went back again. Yeah,
Oh
so
wow.
been back a couple of times. My daughter's been back to Russia and has done immersion Russian courses and done some volunteer work in the orphanage that she was in.
That's awesome. Sort of
Mm,
giving, so almost like giving back. That's pretty cool.
yeah, it's very cool.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's sort of, as a result of that, she's fostered a bit of a closer relationship with her biological siblings as well.
That's awesome. That's cool.
Mm.
All right. So this is going to be a question that I'll save it in my head, which will probably be more applicable for when both have, well, the 1.5 and the one that's in Claire now, which will be coming in March. I'll save that for 10 years down the track.
Yeah.
How, and I posed this question to you initially, how do you groom kids to be successful individuals? Because your kids are basically full-grown adults now. What's your advice? What's your advice? What's your
Okay.
take on
So,
it?
yeah, well, I think you won't have any problems having great kids.
You reckon?
Because firstly, I think there's, there is an environment where most of us in our sphere are probably fairly privileged in that we're educated, we have enough income,
Yes.
we provide a safe environment for our kids. We don't provide a dysfunctional
Household.
environment.
Yep.
We provide all the necessities. They don't go hungry, they get good medical care, all the rest of it. So there's that kind of foundation that we have that we don't even think about.
Yeah.
Whereas there are people in New Zealand who have none of those or have very poor access to all of those, and their foundation starts up a completely different place. So
Yeah.
we're taking a lot for granted that we're already having available for our kids. And genetically, your genetics, your partner's genetics, and you know that there's probably not going to be much of a problem there, although things do. There are quirky things that happen all the time.
Always.
Yeah.
Always.
And, birth injuries and other stuff.
Yes.
So that aside, I think I would say consistency of care is definitely just a huge part of it. And what else? I mean, I was the primary caregiver, and I think, we had the facility, whereas, my husband could do work full time most of the time, and we had a decent enough income that I could just work part-time. So we were fortunate in that respect. And then I like little things starting off when they came here and we were going to school, and things I probably most people don't think about is how we start to educate kids. So I would, just to help them learn English, would go
Yep.
walk along the street to school, because it's only a 10-minute walk, and to kindy, and do play little games like counting, like the letterbox numbers,
Yep. Like
that read
counting.
letterbox numbers, and we go, who can spot the red roof? So, there were words and numbers and colours. Who can
Yep.
see the red car? And we played games. We walked along the street.
Right.
The blue
Gotcha.
fence. Who can spot a one
Yeah.
on a letterbox? Who can spot a two? So
Mm.
there's so many things that I put in place, and our kids, like we, I mean, they're both pretty bright as well, and we could kind of tell it from the beginning. Um, but my son, when he was, just 6 months here in New Zealand, when he was 4, he could count to 30. He'd line up cars and count them to 30. And the kindergarten teacher was like, how does this happen? And it's like, we've been counting, number things
Every
along the road
day.
on the way to kindy every day and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So just a rich environment,
Yep.
and that rich verbal environment where they're always learning things, but they don't realize they're learning things.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah. Okay.
so that's one thing. The other thing, that as they grew up, I really like Carol Dweck's work. Like, she has a book about, I think it's about mindset or something like that, but it's about teaching the value of working to accomplish and not assuming that it relies on an innate talent. So you
Right. Gotcha.
are often good at things. Like, my daughter was really good at writing and drawing. She's just really talented. Like, her handwriting was really good. And there were other things that were a little bit more difficult, like maths, for example. So explaining that, people always start from somewhere, but you don't get better without practice.
Mm.
Even if you've got a weak muscle, training your muscle will make your muscle stronger. And
Yep.
yes, there are some people who are lucky, like their muscles are stronger and they don't have to do nearly as much work to get a strong muscle. But your brain is a muscle, and it's all about whatever you're weak at, you'll always get better if you practice it.
Yeah.
Um,
How would you, I guess, obviously this would really be impacted, I guess, based on the age, how
mhm.
far along the development of the child into teenage even. But how would you, could you maybe give me an example on how that might,
Yeah,
like, how would you phrase it? Like, yeah, like a scenario, play it out.
I think it starts right from the beginning, like not telling kids they're talented or beautiful or clever, but
Okay.
focusing on what they have accomplished by trying and working and practicing.
Gotcha.
So, you're really good at jumping because you're practicing your jumping. You're really good at drawing because you're practicing your drawing. Not, oh my gosh, you're so talented. It's like, because what can you do with talent?
Yeah.
It's either you've got it or you haven't got it. Whereas
Right.
practice,
So the
the
verbiage is sort of more
verbiage.
like encouraging them to try, and if they succeed, it's
Mm,
less of a, it's like good job because you kept trying, less so,
yeah, yeah,
oh, you're really good at this
yeah,
talent kind of thing. So it's like, it's more like a, yeah, like just sort of like saying like,
yeah,
hey,
yeah.
you try, you succeed, keep going kind of thing.
Yeah. And if they don't succeed at one thing, like point out other, when you're a little baby, even little things, like I'd say, when you're a little baby, you couldn't walk, but and you started walking, and you fell over, and then you got better and better over time. And everything in life is like that. You start off really
Mm.
bad. You can start off
Ah,
really badly, but if you keep trying and you keep getting better, you won't make
yeah,
so many mistakes, and it'll become easier over time, and that will be stronger. Like your brain is another muscle, and you've got to make it.
you've got to make it work.
You've got to make it work. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's also something that I've kind of realized. Um, I think this is more prevalent maybe in Asian cultures,
Hmm.
maybe more so than maybe Anglo-Saxon, but like I do realize a lot of my sort of my previous generation, definitely not my parents though. I would say my parents are the outliers if anything.
Hmm.
They're very, very uh, yeah, they think very differently for their parenting style for that time for sure.
Hmm.
But definitely in Asian cultures, it's very much like there's this game where it's so stupid. It's like basically you lay out like four different toys,
Hmm.
like that's like a stethoscope, a calculator, a notepad or something, and then the game is like you chuck the baby there and they'll crawl, and then you're like, oh yeah, that's your thing now, kind of, like it's
Oh well.
wild, but it's an
Oh,
actual thing in Asian culture. Like I distinctively remember this, not me personally, but I
well.
definitely do remember seeing a lot of these sort of situations play out,
Hmm.
and I find that that can actually be quite um I guess like if they take it as a game, sure, but if they kind of kept reinforcing it, I think it could be quite disruptive
Hmm.
and destructive actually with kind of that ongoing development because I guess the kid will kind of grow up thinking that they're really good at this thing. At some point, they're gonna fail,
Hmm.
right? It's inevitable, and then they might kind of go down a very slippery slope. Yeah, it's wild. Hmm. Okay.
Hmm.
Well,
I think,
yeah.
yeah, there's that. I think another thing is to self-regulate. I mean, self-regulation is a big problem with post-institutional kids. But in retrospect, I think a lot of parents, and I don't know actually other parents, but it's easy to go get really angry at your kids when
Yeah,
they
yeah.
and
I
not.
definitely catch myself quite a lot. I try my best to like, it's like, oh, like hang on, like,
Yeah, I know, right? And
they don't even. It's like they don't
oh
even know what they're doing. Like, why are you getting mad?
yeah, and also it's like, how can you expect yourself kids to be regulated when you get
You can't even
angry?
regulate it properly.
You can't even regulate yourself when you get upset. It's like, and I've been thinking about that recently. How when I got upset and angry too much, I think as a parent, and
Yeah,
that's kind of saying, well, you're not allowed to, but I'm allowed to because I'm the parent. I'm in charge, but it doesn't really set a very good model.
yeah, and a lot of the guests that I've kind of spoken to, even up to this point, I think a very big theme
Mm,
that I'm seeing, and it's very synonymous across the board. It doesn't really even defer too much to parenting philosophy or how you think parenting should be. But I think the big theme there is setting that example.
mm,
Like, and then kind of how you put it was like, if I, as an adult, fully grown adult who makes money, who can buy stuff that he or she wants, can't even regulate their emotions because I've been alive for 30, 40, 50 years.
mm.
How can I expect someone who's, in this case, three, let's
Yeah,
say, to
yeah,
regulate it? Like, and if I can't deal with it, like, you can't for sure. Like
yeah.
if I can make 8, 9 figures, well, I mean, probably could. Some people probably could for sure, but like you can't expect a 3-year-old to do it, right? Like it's
No,
impossible.
no,
Bad
exactly.
example, but
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of in that
yeah,
vein,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
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 yeah.
I think,
So is
yeah.
that, yeah. Just trying to think what else. Um, I don't know. You have to ask me another question.
That will go well. You've definitely dropped a lot of gems for sure, and yeah, like the whole emotional regulation thing. I think a lot of I just personally think there's very personal bias for sure, and some parents would probably argue that they barely have the time to do this, and I get it. Like, I think all parents get it when someone says, "I don't have time to do this." But I think it's like find some time, even like just to, especially like newer-ish parents, and
Mm-hmm.
like just find some time to like learn how to regulate your emotions.
Mm,
I think there's a lot more pros than cons that would come out of it. I
mm.
think like meditation, do 5 minute meditation or something, like just, you know, it will help, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And also, the other thing that I found really helpful was some of the work around because attachment issues are an issue with
Okay.
post-institutional kids. So,
Gotcha.
but some of that is quite helpful in that when kids are dysregulated or having tantrums or getting angry and upset,
Uh-huh.
it's like instead of thinking of them as being bad, it's like, and this kind of changed it for me, but it was 2 or 3 years down the track. Um,
Mm.
it's like either kids are coming from either fear or love, and that's pretty basic, but a lot of emotional dysregulation comes out of fear.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yep. Yep. I can see that how that plays out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, relating to that, like what's going on that they're afraid of, what's frightening them, what's upsetting them, not condoning necessarily their reaction, but trying to figure out what's at the heart of it.
Mm.
Whether they had an expectation that didn't happen, whether they wanted something that didn't happen, whether, and in our case, it was like difficulty communicating. That's what
Yeah.
kids
Especially I think in the
often have,
first
and the
first
frustration
year, I
about
reckon.
it. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
But, kids can also just be not, we've got one kid who was always getting into trouble.
Not gonna say who, but one of them.
Yeah.
uh, yeah, yeah. All
Yeah.
right. Well,
So, and, we're putting in natural consequences every single time we possibly could,
yeah,
giving back the things they nicked,
yeah,
paying
yeah, yeah,
for the
yeah,
stuff
yeah.
they broke,
Yep,
all that
yep.
sort of stuff. Yeah.
Or saying sorry to
Not saying
something
sorry
that
or
they,
trying to put
and
it
then they,
right or,
and then they don't want to do it, and then you're like, nope. Kind of have to
yeah.
teach them the basics of fundamental human living.
Mhm. Mm.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, I know you are a very busy woman, so I usually leave this question for all my guests um, coming onto the show. And this is a bit of a play of word, but I get play of words, but obviously it's very intentional in the sense where I know that there are a lot of lessons, and there
Mhm.
really isn't one big lesson, but just trying to like try to just be cheeky with it. Like, what is a biggest lesson with parenting thus far? Because you've kids all grown up now, fully grown, full-fledged adults. I'm sure you might be able to kind of reflect a little bit and go, actually, that's probably a more important one, if anything.
Hmm. Most important one is,
Yeah.
I think, don't cut off communication. Like, keep communication open and never be shocked.
And never be shocked, as in like never be
Be
shocked
shocked,
with what they
but
can do.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
like, yeah, it's like whatever happens, provide support, even no matter how hard it gets. And
Hmm.
don't be judgmental about, you can be disappointed in their choices, but I don't know, it's like, if your kids choose a different type of path or a different religion or not a religion or a religion or, whatever, that's yeah, don't, I guess, don't make it have a huge judgment about that. And if they get into trouble,
Hmm.
support them.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the crux of parenting. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things about parenting, but I think like I just feel like if you just support them how they want it feel,
Mm.
like support them how they want it to be supported, and I
Yeah.
guess that kind of leads into your initial um, lesson, which is like just keeping that communication line open. Then I'd suppose that will kind of help foster that relationship
Mm.
a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think I was going to say another thing, and it's just gone from my head for a second. But I think also supporting that they're always up to something is the other thing,
Um,
especially as they go through into their teenage and adult years.
so
Like
like in the sense of
with the troublemaker lad,
yeah,
um,
lad. Oh, now we know lad.
um, who didn't want to be at school.
Hmm.
You know, putting effort into finding what he actually got inspired by, um,
Gotcha, gotcha.
and making sure he had his driver's license.
Yep,
And he was in holiday programs that kept him out of trouble.
yep.
And, just like support is not always what they want, which is, I want to be left on my own to do my naughty thing. It could be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, pushing them into things that keep them safe as well or keep them occupied.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, we had a lot of little things that we'd do throughout their lives. Like, they both had to choose a summer sport and a winter sport. And if they didn't like it, they would see the season through, then they could choose something else next season. But they had to
Gotcha.
see the season through.
See
That
it
was
through.
completely fine. If they didn't like soccer, they could try whatever, tennis or rugby or whatever. Um, yeah, so I think physical activity is just good because it's good mentally and
Of course.
physically, and
It's
maybe they don't love it, but it's good to do. I don't know, keeping them busy in holiday programs was always good for us because it was challenging having to
yeah, having
very
to.
mentally and physically active kids and keeping them busy all the time. Uh,
Yeah, yeah, I can
yeah,
imagine.
and don't be afraid to get, we have needed and help and support, from outside professionals from time to time, and
Okay.
I think that's okay. It doesn't mean you're failing. It just means that you need another perspective.
Yeah, and I'm definitely like, definitely like, I know the objective reasons behind it. Like on my end, it's like definitely there's gonna be things where I have no idea what I'm doing. But
Mm,
then like I'm just kind of battling in my own head, which I know it's a stupid battle to even have it pop up. It's like I want to try to do things on my own, but I'm like, that's dumb. Like you're a coach, like you know this, like this is impossible. Like you're gonna need help at some point. Everyone needs
yeah,
help.
but
Parenting is it's
even
literally just the
coaches
same
have
way.
coaches, though, right?
Exactly right. Like, and I tell
Yeah.
people, even coaches and coaches, I have coaches, and I'm like, what's
Mm,
the difference with parenting? Like, it's the same thing. So it's one of those like mindsety things that I'm sort of working through in my own. It's like
mm,
objectively, in all the other industries, they're like you just got to get it through your thick skull. The parenting is pretty much the same thing.
yeah, yeah, and we haven't done this before. It's not like it's
Yeah.
this is first time round. You make all the mistakes, and then you go, well, next time round. But that's
I
kind of
think
it.
But I think with parenting as well, it's like you have one chance. Like
Mm,
really, if you kind of think of it in a very philosophical way, like it's one timeline. Like one mistake. You just
mm,
want to you're going to make mistakes, but you just try to minimize the mistakes and minimize the problems. You're going to make them for sure, but it's like
absolutely.
it's
Yeah,
like if you don't get help, the mistakes might be quite large to the point where it can be quite damaging. Whereas if it's a minor thing, you could kind of resolve it quite quickly. Whereas if I
mm,
guess with other um industry, other themes, I guess, with like work or uni and this, like whatever, like you could always go back into it. Whereas I guess in parenting, it's one track, you can't really reverse.
Yeah. And it's okay to admit to your kids you did the wrong thing from time to time.
Oh
Like,
yeah.
sorry, I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have
Yeah,
got
I
angry.
always tell him that, even though I know he doesn't understand what I'm saying. I'm like, look, I'm sorry, my bad. Like I should have put down my phone. It's like, my bad. I know I've worked a little bit too late. I said I would be
Yeah.
here. I did it. Clearly, my fault. Not that he understands, but
Yeah.
hopefully.
I think there's another thing that I would say is teach your kids manners. It's
Mm,
like manners go a really, really long way.
yeah.
And people don't realize how much that can be helpful, like saying
Um,
please and thank you for having me and thank you for dinner and helping people clear up when you're at somebody's place, put the toys away, all of those little things. And I see both my kids have amazing manners now. And yeah, it just,
Yeah.
and it's just extremely helpful.
Mm,
And, like things like sitting down, we still to this day sit down. My daughter's still at home because she's been at university lately. We have, family dinners together, and we have rules like no phones at the table, and
yeah,
that's forever. And we still do
yeah.
that.
Yeah, there's definitely something that we've gone the step of sit down dinner. That the phone thing, that's something I personally need to work on for sure. Like I try to put it in the office and go out, and then sometimes it's like, oh my god, it's like, yeah, one of
Yeah,
those things. It's just one of those things. It's like, damn it, you could do better. You could do better.
yeah, and it's just a habit, really. It doesn't occur to me to have it at the table because we've just
Yeah, you just never. Yeah,
never done it.
exactly. Yeah,
And
for sure.
when we're out at family dinners and functions, it's like you put your phone away.
Mm-hmm.
At parties,
Yeah, yeah,
you don't have it out.
always. Yeah, yeah, that's cool.
Yeah. Mm.
All right. Well, Julianne, thank you for coming on.
No, you're welcome.
Definitely a lot of insights, some that I can probably apply ASAP, some I'll probably have to plus 10 years before I kind of
Yeah.
whip it out the depths of this podcast again and go, oh yeah, that is what she said. All right, time to use this. So thank you for
Yeah.
coming on. Um, I know that you're doing a lot of obviously study research, helping out with a couple of things as well. Um, are there any places that people can sort of check out what you do? Do you teach a little bit? Do you help and stuff like that? Do you coach from memory?
No, not particularly. I mean, I do have, I do nutrition consultations if people
Yes, yes.
contact me and need support.
Yep.
And my specialty area is autoimmune disease, and my research topic for my PhD is rheumatoid arthritis and diet. So typically I get people contacting me who need help in that respect.
Cool.
But it can be anything as well, sort of general weight loss, fat loss,
Yep.
right through
And
to.
that website is juliannetaylornutrition.com.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's the one.
Perfect. I'll put that
Yep,
in the show notes. Awesome. Cool,
cool.
cool. Well, thanks for your time, and we'll
You're
catch you in
welcome.
the next episode.
Okay, thank you. Nice to talk.